Hi everyone, Tax Breaks here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it is time for a review of the new Czarface and Ghostface Killah album, Czarface Meets Ghostface. This is a new collaborative album from the comic book villain inspired and also MF Doom inspired hip-hop trio known as Czarface, featuring MC Esoteric, Inspected Deck, and 7L on production. All of these guys have been in the game a while and are essentially East Coast hardcore hip-hop vets. And now with this new record over here, they are bringing on the Ghostface Killah, which is actually a pretty exciting prospect, not only because of the obvious Wu-Tang connection between Inspected Deck and Ghost, but Ghostface Killah has come out with his own material recently that has been heavily comic book inspired. He's also, Mr. Tony Starks. Ghostface Killah has also worked with MF Doom in the past as well. The fit between Ghost and Czarface is actually so sensible and natural that the results might end up being painfully predictable. To the point where I'm just not sure if this is exactly what Czarface needs right now, because while I do think the trio did start off pretty well earlier this decade with a couple of very good to great records, ever since Every Hero Needs a Villain, I feel like the trio has slowly been painting themselves into a corner. The MF Doom crossover they delivered last year did kind of pick up the excitement a little bit, and unfortunately that newfound electricity that I hoped would be here with the entrance of Ghostface, it's not here. There are actually multiple tracks on this thing that Ghostface doesn't even appear on. Even the longest track on this record, toward the end of the album, which has the most transitions of any track here, feasibly the most space of any song in here, why is Ghost not on this cut? I just feel like if Czarface had anything exciting to do on their own at this point, they would have done that instead of going so quickly into yet another collaborative record, and this is so scant as well in comparison with the Doom album last year. I mean, in a lot of ways, this record does check the usual boxes that a Czarface album does. You do get another helping of 7L's quality and dramatic and funky and soulful instrumentals that sound like a mix of classic hardcore hip-hop production mixed with like the incidental music of a classic 70s superhero cartoon. Like the instrumental from the King Heard Voices. It sounds like a mix of boom bap with like the Body Snatcher soundtrack. There are some elements of the instrumentals here that do feel a little old school cinematic, kind of weird, kind of sci-fi, a little Twilight Zone. Occasionally there are some really cool beat switches. Occasionally there are some crazy, zany vocal samples and weird, colorful sound effects. The beats on this thing are simultaneously grimy and quirky. They're the best thing on the record in my opinion, and yet they do so little to make up for all of the lyrical shortcomings of Czarface Meets Ghostface. There are so many completely average Ghostface verses on this thing. Not only does he drop multiple uninteresting verses on this record, but his flow on the song Mongolian Beef absolutely sucks. It's got no groove, he's barely on tempo, he's like Blueface in the beat. Or at least like, this is what I think people who hate Blueface thinks Blueface sounds like. For a handful of guys who are directly connected to what's seen as like a golden age of lyricism in rap music, the bars on this record are kind of unimpressive. It's mostly a case-by-case basis from track to track. There are cuts on here where Ghost and SO and INS do come out with all guns blazing. The intro track Face Off kicks things off pretty decently. The song Iron Claw, I think front to back, is pretty great. Like when SO says, you put the S in wordplay, you get swordplay. So you know that stabbing tracks is my forte. Or INS when he says, what you see is real, what you heard is false. All I have in this world is my word and my balls. Money calling, stomach talking, hungry often, honey's hawking, haters hating, funny talking. But there are plenty of eyebrow-raising rhymes and similes on this thing that completely overshadow highlights like these. Electric toothbrush the level of your buzz be, I do it on my own, you need a click like BuzzFeed. Or this one line about avoiding political spittin', and truthfully the only Breitbart I know is Simpson. Putting my palm on my face. Putting my palm on my face. My alma mater is the School of Hard Knockers. Today's special, grilled medulla oblongata. But I ain't picking up what they putting down. It's like I got a bad back, but they just a sad sack. Sad rap, helter skelter. I seen people stabbed in the shelter, acting bipolar like they grabbing seltzer. Still getting our burgundy and gray on. We colorful like that box of 64 crayons. The hardest Ghostface bar of all time. Coming for that loot off top, no recouping. The way they avoid your boy, call me gluten. That line comes off of Czarface 87, one of a few tracks on this thing that sounds like a really bad MC from the 80s wrote it. I feel like a lot of the time what this album is presenting us lyrically is like hip-hop's answer to dad jokes. These are just like dad bars, but instead of trying to be funny, they're like trying to be slick or hard or impressive, but just like a dad joke. All it does is just elicit like this. There's also something about INS's delivery on this record that kind of bugs me. It sort of seems like he's rapping in this fashion where he puts on this voice that I'm rapping. It's totally unnatural. If you've heard the lyrical and instrumental formula of one track on this thing, you've most likely heard the instrumental and lyrical formula of 75% of this record. These guys do come through with a pretty sharp concept cut on Morning Routine, which does have a good sense of humor and a really interesting progression, even if there are a few lines that do make me groan. The King Heard Voices is one of the few cuts on this thing with a proper hook, but the chorus is absolutely awful because Kendra Morris's voice is layered and harmonized with these chorus effects that makes her singing sound like she's an obnoxious alien. There's also an intro on this thing that I can't quite get my head around. We don't really go into the whole comic book thing, but instead it sounds like a really bad wrestling promo getting cut where the person, is he a hero? Is he a heel? There's a point where he sounds like he's almost an announcer, but also a wrestler. He slips in and out toward the end of a really bad Macho Man Randy Savage impression. It's really awkward and goes on way too long and does an awful job of setting the tone. Then the album ends off with a track that's labeled as if it's like a leftover cut or something, but it sounds really no less significant than any other song on here, which I think says a lot about the quality of the other tracks on this record. There are really only a couple of songs on this thing that I enjoyed from front to back. There are a lot of listenable moments on this record, I think, but in order to get there, you have to kind of ignore what's going on lyrically most of the time. And I'm not really sure what to say about this record at this point, other than that I'm just disappointed. I feel like everyone on this record outside of 7L is just severely punching under their weight. Nothing Ghostface did on this thing blew me away. The drop in quality INS presents from the last album to this album is slightly shocking in just how many corny bars he's putting out there per verse. Esso is easily the most impressive and consistent rapper on this entire record, but again, it's really not enough to lift up the entire LP. I'm feeling a light to decent 5 on this thing. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Ghostface, INS, Esso, 7L, Czarface, forever.